What is up, Light Fam? It is David, your spiritual awakening coach, here to help you through your spiritual awakening. Have you been in the dark night of the soul for what feels like forever? Well, let's talk about 3 reasons you are in a never ending dark night of the soul right now. Let's go. The first reason that you are in a never ending dark night of the soul is because you will not let go of what no longer serves you. Your ego has convinced you that it is a threat to survival to let that certain thing go. Now, your heart knows that it's not a threat to survival, and your heart also knows what it is you should be letting go of, even though your ego tries to tell you, oh no, you still need that. Yeah, you sure about that? Think about it. If something no longer serves, that typically means that you've outgrown it, which means that when that thing was originally initiated, it was initiated at a lower level, a lower understanding of self, or a lower level of conscious awareness. Maybe it was originated from the false self. Maybe you're more authentic now. But whatever that reason is, it's at a lower level than where you currently are. So why would it be a threat to survival if you let it go? You see, that may have been a relationship that was started from a disempowered state, maybe a career that you hated, even a level of consciousness. Maybe there was a particular mental paradigm that you were raised with that was just a limited, fear-based, man-made paradigm of nonsense. And now you've reached a level where you no longer resonate with that whatsoever. It's okay to let that go because you're meant to grow and expand. So the reason that it feels like a threat to survival is because you don't know the new thing to grab onto yet. The higher level relationship or the higher level career or the higher level of conscious awareness. So this is a good idea to throw the ego a bone, as I like to say, where you want to write out what is that higher level of consciousness? What is that higher relationship? What is that higher heart-led vocation, or whatever it is that you're supposed to be letting go? What is the opposite of that? What is the higher version of that? And once you start to write that out and you see it in black and white, the mind now has a written program that it can move in the direction of, right? So it's much easier to let go of what no longer serves if you now have a clear program to follow. You take the action steps in that direction. Even if they're baby steps, you go in the direction of the new programming, and it's much easier to let go of the old programming, and the ego no longer views it as a threat to let go of. It's just an upgrade. And the second reason that you are in a never-ending dark night of the soul is you won't surrender to the process. You keep fighting the dark night of the soul. Order through chaos is a natural part of the ascension process. The old structures, the old people, places, and things have to be broken down to make room for the new, higher level people, places, and things that you always intended to live and experience through after you decided to incarnate. So there has to be room for the new thing. So instead of swimming upstream and fighting the dark night of the soul and vilifying the pain of the dark night of the soul, let that pain be your catalyst to push through to with a new sense of discovery, like this curiosity. Who is this new person trying to be birthed? I love what Michael Beckwith says. He says, let the pain push until the vision pulls. So don't vilify the pain. Don't fight the purging process of the dark night of the soul. Keep order through chaos in the back of your mind. Understand that it's a part of the process. I know it's easier said than done. Yes, I know it's painful, and I know that it's scary, especially when you've got the ego throwing you into fight or flight because it believes losing that old life, that old identity, is a threat to survival. And it believes that it's a threat to survival because it doesn't know who the new identity or what the new life is going to be like. Hence, it's in the dark, hence the dark night of the soul, right? So until that new identity comes out of the darkness and into the light, the ego is going to feel like it is a threat to survival. But just keep telling yourself it's a part of the process. Swim with the current, with that curiosity to see what that new life and what that new identity is going to be like. and don't vilify the pain. Allow the pain to push you into that new life. Now, before we get on to the third reason that you are in a never-ending dark night of the soul, if you're finding value in the content, please click the subscribe button. Also, check out this Dark Night of the Soul playlist. There's 56 videos on how to get through the Dark Night of the Soul, what are the stages of the Dark Night of the Soul, signs and symptoms, etc. Now on with the video. And the third reason that you are in a never-ending dark night of the soul is you're not asking what is the new identity or the new life that's trying to be birthed from the pain. So clearly this coincides very nicely with the second reason that you're in a never-ending dark night of the soul, because you're not surrendering to the process. So when you ask, who is the new identity? What is the new life? You're surrendering to the process, and then you start to do some self-discovery. Maybe that new identity has a higher level of healed trauma. Now, how would that come about? Well, you start to go within, you start to do shadow work, you start to heal all of the things that your ego has told you that perverts your understanding that you are already perfect, whole, and complete. Why? Because your source having a physical experience. So as soon as you start to heal that unhealed trauma, typically from childhood, you're doing the shadow work, you start to become more authentic. You start to live from the heart. Live from the heart, and the world will adjust. Yeah, let's say that again for the people out there in the cheap seats. Live from the heart, and the world will adjust. But how do you live from the heart? You have to heal all of the trauma that has you living from the ego. Remember, the ego is in charge of survival. It believes that you need to people please or chase validation or get approval and acceptance or ease that abandonment trauma to survive. This is a lie. You don't. So when you heal that trauma that makes you believe the lies of the ego, you start to live more from the heart. You get on your authentic path. You identify as love itself. When you identify as love itself, which you are, because the dominant frequency of source is love, and your source having a physical experience, when love becomes your identity, you just naturally, easily share the same space with love because it's your own frequency. It's a vibrational match. When you go in the direction of your heart and you identify as absolute abundance itself, why would this be? Because your source having a physical experience, and source is absolute abundance. It's not something that you need to get and cajole from outside in the external. You just are it. It simply shares the same space with you because it's your own frequency. It's your identity. The universe is always going to mirror back to you your identity or your perceived identity. That's a better way of saying it. We know what your identity is, but do you perceive it correctly? In other words, are you enough in your heart and not in your ego to perceive it correctly? So the universe is always going to mirror back to you your perceived identity. So when you start to heal that trauma, the real you, the authentic you, which is in your heart, the real you, that your heart is the energetic house of the authentic you, starts to come out. You start to be more authentic. You become more sovereign. You validate yourself. You approve yourself. You love yourself. And when there's no resistance to those things because you don't believe that you don't have it, when you believe that you've got to get it, you're standing in the frequency of the absence of it, which is what a lot of law of attraction people completely miss. But that's a different video. But when you identify as it, you simply are it, and it's a vibrational match. So who is that new identity? What is that new life? As I said in the previous suggestion, write it down. You're writing out the new program, and don't type it, handwrite it. We all can just mindlessly think of something else and just type a million words a minute. But when you handwrite it, you're putting intention into those words. You're putting intention into the new 2.0 version of you. And the mind sees it as black and white, and then you take steps in that direction. And now the new you, the new life, the new identity that's trying to be birthed from the pain of the dark night of the soul is not off into someday. As I always say, I still haven't found someday on the calendar. It's not off into someday. You start taking the baby steps, the action steps in that direction of the new identity, and then you just step into that new identity through habit. The new identity is just a new habit, new behavioral patterns in alignment with who you want to be. I hope this has helped. I love you guys. Namaste.